Next, I wanted to go over the notes that we took Thursday and Friday to make sure that all of you had the notes that you needed to have. In addition to this video, I will also post pictures of the note pages so that you can make sure that your spiral is up to date and ready to go for session 4 on Monday. The first thing was within our anchor chart section of our spiral. We started our first anchor chart for Unit 1. To think deeply about characters. In Session 1 on Thursday, we learned that we must expect characters to be complicated and show more than one trait. In Session 2, we learned that we have to revise our thinking in the face of new evidence. Then we started our notes in our workshop section. On our first page, we went ahead and started Unit 1, a deep study of character. Bend 1, considering complex character traits. Thursday, August 15th, we started off with Session 3 because we wanted to make sure that we developed our course of study before we started this unit so that we could be practicing the skills with the book that we selected as a pair. First, we remembered that similar books have similar characters. For example, Disney princesses are usually smart but struggles, for example. We also know that similar books could be set up by genre, setting, or author. Those are things that can link our books together. For genre, for example, fantasy novels, I may have reluctant heroes, mentors, villains who want power, characters who go on quests. Books can also be linked together through their setting. For example, novels that are set in schools sometimes have a new kid, bullies, a weak kid, a popular kid who's the antagonist or bad guy. They may also be sci-fi, fantasy, or realistic fiction. And they also usually have things about kids finding their first loves. Books can also be linked together by the author who wrote them. Roald Dahl wrote The Witches, James and the Giant Peach, Matilda, and EFG. All 4 of these books are similar because they all are about kids, magical and unrealistic, and also have exotic settings. After we did this, we went ahead and created our course of study. We looked at our chart, we looked at our book to figure out how many pages we needed to read a night to make sure that our book would be finished by Friday, August 3rd. Then, in partners, the partners discussed and decided how they were going to communicate with each other. Today, we discussed Session 1, investigating multiple character traits. We found that we can use text evidence to develop our ideas about complex characters. Text evidence helps us do that. When we read the text, think about our inferences, make connections and ask questions about the reading, and then write down, highlight, or underline the specific parts of the text that help to explain our thinking and to answer questions. Text evidence helps us to notice details and key information about characters' traits. So what are some character traits? The next part in our notes, we went ahead and pasted a list of character traits. Of course, there are way more character traits than this, but this helps us figure that out too and kind of look at some things and give us an idea. We then went ahead and did a teacher model, developing our ideas about characters. We read the short story Popularity. In Popularity, we were introduced to a 4th grader named Will. We completed this graphic organizer. We kind of thought that maybe Will was bitter or longing. The second trait we thought was maybe he was observant or clever. And then we thought maybe he was uncaring or ruthless. We did this section in question marks because we didn't really have enough evidence to really say whether or not he was that or wasn't that. The evidence that made us think that he might be these things was he hated picking up clovers with the Allens. He really wanted to be popular, and he wished he wouldn't have to hang out with them. We thought he was observant or clever because he compared the Allens to the other boys as well as himself. He watched and listened, and he waited 3 days outside the popular circle. For his chance. Uncaring or ruthless. It took months, but he waited and pretended to enjoy Mitch's stories. He didn't just get even with Mitch, he ruined Mitch. He didn't know what happened to Mitch. He only knew that he was now popular. Then we have our second set of notes. Unit 1, a deep study of character. Bend 1, considering complex character traits. Session 2, investigate multiple character traits. In this session, we learned that we can revise our thinking when given new evidence, meaning we can change our minds about what we first thought about a character by 1, looking for new details, 2, considering the evidence, and 3, revising our first ideas. In this section, I decided that I think that at first I thought his dominant trait was he was longing, because Will really wanted to be popular. He waited and watched the other kids. But now I think he's really hopeful because he started imagining himself as popular and felt he had a chance. I also at first thought he was ruthless because he didn't care what happened to Mitch. He just wanted to be popular at all costs. But by the end, that last paragraph, I thought he was cautious and aware. Because even though he's popular and has more friends than he knows what to do with, he doesn't trust any of them and knows how easily he could be back picking clovers with the Allens. After this, we also had vocabulary and an FYI section. In the FYI section, we talked about some information that we learned while reading our short story, Popularity. Looking at popularity, the first thing that we noticed was that the title was in quotations and italics. Italics are used for large works, movie and television titles, titles of books, magazines, newspapers, and albums. Quotations are used for sections of works, titles of chapters in a book, titles of articles in a newspaper or magazine, titles of poems or short stories in a book, song titles of an album. All of these will be put in quotation marks. If you are writing the title of a large work by hand, use an underline in place of italics. So for example, I love the song Sunflower from the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse soundtrack. I put Sunflower in quotation marks because it is a part of a larger work. And then I underlined Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse because that is the actual work that Sunflower is in, by the artist Post Malone. The next thing, we wrote 2 vocabulary words in our vocabulary section. We wrote the word dominant, which means the most important or powerful. We needed to know this word to do our assignment because we needed to know what is the most dominant character trait or the most important or powerful character trait that our characters display in our books. We also wrote the word longing. We were introduced to this character trait while reading the short story or chapter Popularity, because Will seemed to display a lot of longing. Longing means sadly or desperately wanting something. And that is all that we did Thursday and Friday in our notebook.